think the fascinating thing is how did these structures get built? We're talking about stone that is 25 feet high, stone that is hundreds of tons.
The ancient ruins of Tiwanaku hold a massive secret beneath the dirt. Experts thought this high-altitude city was just a collection of isolated stone temples. They used ground-penetrating radar to check the empty spaces between the monuments. The results shocked the entire archaeological community. The empty dirt was hiding a vast network of sealed passages. Giant stone walls and underground corridors connected the entire site. The city was far larger and more advanced than anyone ever guessed. What they found buried in the dark completely changes the story of human survival in the extreme mountains. Scanning a forgotten empire, the Sigi, environment surrounding this archaeological site is brutal and unforgiving. Situated in the South American Altiplano near Lake Titicaca, the region experiences wild temperature swings. The temperature plummets below freezing at night. It suffers intense solar radiation during the day. The air is incredibly thin. It holds roughly 30% less oxygen than the air at sea level. This makes manual labor exhausting for the human body. Every single task requires massive physical exertion. Just walking across the plateau leaves a person breathless. Yet between the years 500 and 1000, a sprawling society thrived right here. They built a massive capital in a place where most humans struggled to survive a single winter. For starters, the builders constructed an agricultural surplus using an ingenious system of raised fields. These fields are known locally as sucacolos. They utilize surrounding water channels to absorb heat during the day. They release that heat at night. This created a protective microclimate. It shielded vital crops from the deadly mountain frost. The farmers grew massive amounts of native potatoes and high-protein quinoa. This agricultural mastery provided the energy needed to fuel an immense workforce. Everyone becomes fixated on the giant stone monuments, but the farming infrastructure alone is a marvel of ancient engineering. The fields covered thousands of acres around the lake. They supported a population that some experts estimate reached 40,000 people at its peak. Feeding that many mouths at 13,000 feet is an absolute triumph of logistics. There are still many aspects under scholarly debate, but what researchers can confirm is that this society operated with a level of central planning that rivals modern cities. The rulers organized massive labor gangs. They sourced materials from quarries located miles away. They built a society that influenced the entire Andean region for centuries. The art style and religious icons from this city spread across thousands of miles. For a long time, researchers mapped the visible ruins and thought they had a complete picture of the ceremonial center. The Kalasasaya Temple and the Akapana Pyramid stood as isolated structures. They were surrounded by empty plains covered in tough mountain grass. Many observers were confused about how disconnected these massive monuments seemed to be. It looked like an empty landscape dotted with a few grand buildings. The early maps drawn by explorers showed these structures floating in a sea of nothingness. They assumed the city was just an empty pilgrimage site where people gathered a few times a year. In retrospect, that assumption was the critical red flag. A population of 40,000 people needs houses. They need roads. They need workshops and storage buildings. The ground between these monuments was unnaturally uneven. Small dips and slight rises in the dirt hinted at something buried below. For decades, archaeologists walked right over the greatest secret of the Andes. In the year 2007, a massive geophysical survey was launched. The goal was to look beneath the surface without turning over a single spade of dirt. Teams deployed ground-penetrating radar across the plateau. They strapped heavy antennas to small carts and pushed them back and forth across the grass in tight grid patterns. They also used magnetometry and electrical conductivity meters. These tools measure the tiny magnetic signatures and electrical resistance of the soil. Nobody expected what happened next, but the computer screens almost immediately began lighting up with massive anomalies. The data did not show scattered rocks or natural geology. It showed a hidden world, mapping buried passages. The scanning technology works by sending high-frequency electromagnetic pulses deep into the earth. When those pulses hit something dense, like a buried stone wall or a compacted clay floor, the signal bounces back to the surface antenna. The computer records the exact time it takes for the echo to return. This creates a highly accurate three-dimensional map of the underground structures. Magnetometry measures tiny variations in the magnetic field of the soil. This reveals areas where the earth was physically disturbed by human hands. It easily spots places where clay was baked hard by ancient fires. What most people do not realize is that these non-destructive methods provide a complete subsurface map without risking damage to the fragile ruins. The data processing took months. Computers analyzed millions of individual data points across several acres of dirt. The survey teams worked long hours stitching the digital maps together. The final images revealed crisp geometric lines hiding just 3 to 6 feet below the topsoil. These were definitively not natural rock formations. They were straight lines and perfect right angles. This is a key detail. The supposedly empty space between the Kalasasaya and Pumapunku was actually packed tightly with hidden architecture. The survey detected long corridors and vast courtyards. They found sealed ceremonial access points that had been completely swallowed by the earth over a millennium. These buried corridors completely transformed the understanding of the site. They proved that the monuments were not isolated at all. They were integrated components of a continuous urban fabric. Finding an entire hidden neighborhood at an elevation of 13,000 feet completely rewrote the historical record. The layout revealed by the ground-penetrating radar showed intentional design. These buried passages were built to control human movement across the city. The corridors linked different ceremonial spaces. They created guided pathways for ancient inhabitants to follow during massive public rituals. The rulers wanted to control exactly what the people saw and heard as they moved through the city. These were not simple dirt paths. The radar indicated dense materials lining the routes. This suggests paved stone walkways and solid retaining walls. The sheer volume of material required to construct these hidden connections is extraordinary, moving thousands of tons of stone across a high-altitude plain without draft animals or the wheel requires a deep understanding of physics. The ancient builders had no horses or oxen. They relied entirely on human muscle. Workers likely used thick ropes woven from tough highland grasses. They probably employed a system of wooden rollers or smooth mud tracks to slide the massive blocks into place. The logistics of feeding and organizing these moving teams represent a separate engineering miracle entirely. The dirt covering these walls did not arrive overnight. Over 1,000 years of severe wind erosion and heavy seasonal rains deposited layers of soil over the abandoned city. Periodic flooding from Lake Titicaca brought thick mud across the plains. The earth slowly reclaimed the architecture. It sealed the passages under a heavy blanket of clay and gravel. This natural burial preserved the deep foundations. It locked the walls in a dark tomb. It also concealed the true scale of the civilization for centuries. The visible ruins that tourists visit today make up less than 10% of the actual ancient urban footprint. The vast majority of the city is sleeping right beneath their feet. Based on satellite data and drone surveys, researchers are discussing a site within the walls that covers 650 hectares. It is enormous in scope. Only approximately 2 to 3% of the site is currently accessible to the public. Alongside the corridors, the radar picked up distinct signatures of a massive subterranean water management network. Fresh water is critical for survival in the mountains. Managing it across a flat plateau, prone to sudden seasonal flooding, is an engineering challenge of the highest order. The scans detected a labyrinth of buried stone conduits. They found deep drainage channels running parallel to the sealed passages. These conduits were engineered with precise downward slopes. This maintained a steady flow of water at all times. It prevented stagnation and controlled soil erosion during heavy storms. The builders understood exactly how to move water safely past their clay foundations. The level of hydrological engineering involved is remarkable. They were not just moving water for basic drinking needs. They were routing it through the ceremonial complexes for visual and acoustic effect. Flowing water creates a specific sound. Routing it through stone channels beneath the ground would have produced a continuous resonant hum beneath the feet of the inhabitants. This audio landscape was a deliberate choice by the city planners. They integrated the natural elements directly into their structural design. They made the city sound alive. As the mapping continued, the survey teams noticed even larger geometric anomalies. These shapes spread out from the central core of the monuments. They found evidence of massive residential compounds. They located buried workshops where artisans crafted tools and pottery. They identified large storage facilities built to hold the potato surplus. These were tightly packed around the ceremonial center. Researchers gradually realized they were not just looking at a religious site. They had found a bustling and densely populated metropolis. The empty plains were a total illusion. The sealed passages were the main arteries of a massive city that had vanished from sight. Every new radar scan revealed another forgotten structure hiding below the grass, beneath the sinking temple. To understand why this civilization built downwards, one must examine the structures that are already exposed to the sky. The semi-subterranean temple is one of the most striking features of the entire site. Unlike traditional temples that reach upward toward the sky, this structure was dug deep into the hard earth. It is an open-air square courtyard sunk almost 7 feet below the surrounding ground level. Accessing the floor requires descending a set of heavy monolithic stone stairs. One of the most overlooked aspects of this temple is its sheer psychological impact. Descending into the earth shifts the acoustic environment entirely. It dampens the harsh, howling winds of the plateau. It creates an atmosphere of intense isolation and deep focus. A visitor steps out of the chaotic mountain weather and into a silent stone enclosure. The retaining walls of this sunken court are built from large vertical pillars of red sandstone. These thick pillars are filled in with smaller, roughly cut stones. Protruding from these walls are dozens of carved stone faces. These tenon heads are all unique. They feature different facial expressions and unusual cranial shapes. Some appear highly human with distinct cheekbones. Others look slightly stylized or even skeletal with large, hollow eyes. They stare outward blankly from the stone walls. They completely surround anyone standing on the sunken dirt floor. This creates one of the most psychologically intimidating architectural spaces in the ancient world. The exact meaning of the heads remains highly debated among experts. Some argue they represent defeated enemies from distant lands whose severed heads were placed on display. Others suggest they depict the diverse ethnic groups that made up the sprawling empire. Some researchers think they represent the honored ancestors of the ruling elite, watching over the rituals below. The drainage system in this sunken temple is a masterclass in ancient hydrology. Digging a giant pit in an area that experiences heavy seasonal rains would ordinarily result in a flooded chamber. Yet the semi-subterranean temple remains perfectly drained throughout the entire year. The engineers installed a highly effective stone conduit system beneath the floor. It quickly pulls rainwater away from the center. It channels the water outside the massive temple walls. It discharges the runoff safely into the surrounding soil, far from the foundations. They understood the mechanics of gravity and water pressure with remarkable precision. The recent radar surveys discovered that this specific sunken temple is not an isolated design feature. The data indicates that other similar sunken structures may be completely buried nearby. They are filled to capacity with centuries of compacted earth. The prospect of additional subterranean courts existing underground is extraordinary. They remained sealed away, with their own carved heads staring blindly into the dark. The early archaeologists who cleared the first temple had barely scratched the surface of the underground ritual landscape. The civilization maintained a deep cosmological connection to the earth. They viewed the subterranean realm as a source of origin and immense spiritual power. They believed their ancestors emerged from the dark caves of the mountains. By building downwards, they were physically embedding their society into the bedrock. They were bringing their rituals closer to the underworld. The radar then revealed a massive new connection. The scan showed a direct link between these sunken courts and the largest monument on the plateau, uncovering engineered drainage. The scan data pointed directly toward the imposing bulk of the Akapana. The Akapana dominates the landscape. It rises nearly 60 feet above the flat plain. For generations, early explorers and even local inhabitants assumed it was simply a natural hill. They thought it had merely been modified with some simple retaining walls around its base. Modern archaeological excavations and core drilling proved the exact opposite. The Akapana is entirely artificial. It is a massive stepped platform mound, built completely from the ground up by human hands. The sheer volume of earth hauled to the site to construct this artificial mountain defies easy comprehension. The builders created a tiered pyramid featuring 7 massive terraces. Each terrace is held in place by expertly fitted stone blocks. The internal structure of the Akapana is a brilliant display of layered engineering. The builders did not simply pile up loose dirt. They constructed a complex matrix of interlocking stone cells. They filled these cells with specific types of soil and heavy gravel. This ensured the massive structure would not collapse under its own crushing weight. It prevented the mud from sliding apart during the heavy seasonal rains. They built a solid foundation that has survived over 1,000 years of seismic activity. As archaeologists dug deeper into the terraces, they uncovered an internal plumbing system unparalleled in the ancient Americas. The entire pyramid was specifically designed to process water. At the very top of the Akapana, there was a large sunken courtyard that collected heavy rainwater during the wet season. Instead of allowing the water to run down the sides and erode the earthen structure, the engineers responded brilliantly. They built a network of perfectly carved stone pipes. These channels routed the water directly into the interior of the pyramid. The water flowed down through the sealed interior. It cascaded from one terrace level to the next. It emerged briefly on the surface of a lower terrace before plunging back into the stone matrix. The builders intentionally routed thousands of gallons of water through a structure composed largely of dirt and stone. This required absolute perfection in the jointing of the stone conduits. A single leak would have caused massive internal erosion, leading to a catastrophic collapse of the entire pyramid within hours. The acoustic result of this internal plumbing would have been extraordinary. During a heavy rainstorm, the entire pyramid would have vibrated. It echoed with the powerful sound of rushing water. It functioned as a massive resonant instrument. The structure was effectively mimicking the nearby mountain peaks. Real mountains capture rain and release it through internal springs and rushing streams. The ancient architects turned a constructed building into a living mountain. The Akapana was not just a static building made of inert rock. It was a dynamic functioning machine. It was designed to manipulate the senses and demonstrate absolute control over the natural world. The ground-penetrating radar showed precisely where the water traveled next. The water exiting the base of the Akapana fed directly into the buried subterranean networks running across the city. The water system connected the entire sprawling complex like giant veins. It fed the fields, the workshops, and the deep ceremonial courts. The entire city was unified by the flow of gravity-fed water. Shocking true urban footprinter. Short distance from the main complex lies another massive mystery that pushes the limits of ancient engineering even further. Pumapunku is a site that has baffled engineers and stonemasons for decades. This area is famous for its massive interlocking megalithic blocks. Some of the red sandstone slabs weigh over 130 tons. The level of precision cutting found here is absolutely astonishing. Blocks of hard grey andesite feature perfectly straight lines. They have sharp right angles and complex geometric indentations. They appear as though they were machined in a modern industrial facility. The builders did not have iron or steel tools. They achieved this extreme precision using harder stone hammers. They used wet abrasive sand to slowly polish the cuts. They possessed remarkable patience and an extraordinary understanding of geometry. The blocks featured deep grooves and drilled holes. These were intended for copper and arsenic bronze clamps. The metal was melted in small furnaces and poured molten directly into the stone grooves. As the metal cooled, it contracted and pulled the massive pieces firmly together. This technique made the heavy walls highly resistant to the frequent earthquakes that strike the Andes. They built structures specifically designed to endure. The radar surveys around Pumapunku delivered another substantial surprise. The site currently appears completely destroyed. Massive blocks are scattered across the dirt like discarded fragments. Many observers assumed a massive earthquake shattered the complex centuries ago. Research revealed that Pumapunku was never actually finished. The dirt ramps used to drag the heavy stones into place were still present. They were simply buried beneath the topsoil. Large stone blocks were found in various stages of completion. They were abandoned along the ancient transport routes leading from the distant quarries across the lake. The massive construction project stopped abruptly. The collapse and what remains, the entire civilization subsequently collapsed. Paleoclimatologists studied deep ice cores from the nearby Quelcaya ice cap. They discovered evidence of a severe and sustained drought. This dry period struck the region around the year 1000. It lasted for several decades without relief. The water levels in Lake Titicaca dropped drastically. The raised agricultural fields dried up and turned to dust. The massive food surplus simply vanished. The society could not sustain its large population in such a hostile environment without steady water. The people were forced to abandon the great city. They left their monumental architecture unfinished. It was exposed to the harsh mountain elements. Over the centuries, the wind and drifting soil buried the corridors. The dust covered the deep foundations and the paved connecting pathways. It left only the tallest stone monuments visible above the grass. The true mystery is not how the city fell. The real question is exactly how much of it still remains hidden underground. The 2007 radar survey covered only a small fraction of the surrounding area. Experts now estimate the ancient urban footprint likely extends for over 4 square miles. Beneath the flat, barren terrain lies a vast labyrinth of sealed passages and buried temples. There are forgotten neighborhoods waiting to be found. The data confirms the city was an organized and carefully planned metropolis. It featured distinct residential districts and massive hidden infrastructure. Researchers confronted a difficult reality. They cannot physically excavate the entire site. Digging up 4 square miles of compacted clay at 13,000 feet is logistically impossible. It would take centuries of sustained labor and would destroy the fragile contextual integrity of the ruins. As non-invasive scanning technology continues to improve, researchers are mapping the city digitally. Computers allow scholars to walk through virtual corridors that have not seen daylight in 1,000 years. The empty plains are actually the thick roof of a buried world. The civilization left their greatest legacy hidden safely underground. The real treasure at Tiwanaku is not buried gold or silver artifacts. The true treasure is the breathtaking scale of their urban planning. It all ended when the mountain climate changed. The severe drought forced everyone to abandon their homes. The sheer volume of what they managed to build before that bitter end remains astonishing. The complete silence of the Altiplano is profoundly deceptive. The heavy earth holds the deep secrets of an empire waiting to be fully mapped. The relentless radar sweeps continue to penetrate the ancient soil, revealing massive structures on monitors with every pass. Miles of sealed stone corridors stretch out into the darkness, completely untouched by human footsteps for 10 centuries. This sprawling underground footprint confirms that the builders possessed an absolute genius for engineering. They adapted to a brutal environment that should have claimed their lives. They tamed a freezing mountain, carving out a massive subterranean world specifically designed to survive the harshest conditions imaginable. The sheer scale of the earth-moving operation stands as an undisputed wonder of the ancient world, especially considering the complete absence of modern machinery. Every single block was cut, moved, and placed by hand in thin air that makes breathing a painful struggle for modern excavation teams. Their sophisticated mastery of stone and water management remains a monumental testament to human willpower and collective coordination. As the digital maps continue to expand, they reveal an intricate network of specialized chambers, aqueducts, and structural pillars that defy the perceived limitations of their era. This mountain conceals a highly organized civilization that engineered its own survival, leaving behind a silent, monumental legacy that researchers are only beginning to fully comprehend. Are we entirely wrong about ancient human potential when whole cities wait silently beneath the soil? Share your perspective in the comments and subscribe for more explorations of the ancient world's greatest archaeological mysteries, amazing discoveries. Make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon. Share this video with friends and join the discussion on what these findings could mean. Your thoughts and questions are important, so let's explore incredible mysteries together.